Hey Patrick, how you doing? All right, Space Cowboy, what do we have going on here? Looking pretty good. Good start. Really, really good stuff. A few things I really love about this, and then I have a few recommendations. I see the one thing I'm noticing immediately is there's no JPEG or PDF submitted, so I won't be able to do any kind of zooming in unless I do a system zoom, which you won't see on your end. So I'm going to have to end up doing a lot of scrolling here. So hopefully it doesn't make you too dizzy, right? So let's go ahead and get started. Um, the concept is great. I love the narrative quality is really neat. I love the connection between the boots here and here, and I just think that's kind of this kind of self-contemplative mood that kind of almost I'm almost imagining the driver of this car imagining themselves in this setting. So you're definitely telling a story here, and I think it's really really interesting. I don't see this as taking a picture of the car scene. I see it more as just kind of referring to the phone, whether it's social media, whether it's looking something up, whether it's listening to something, reading an email, whatever the situation is. But I don't necessarily see this as a depiction of taking a picture of this image. So you kind of have this reciprocal relationship of the person in the car imagining themselves, and then in this setting, as depicted by the commonality of the boots, and then having this kind of reflecting back of taking a picture. So I'm not getting that. If this image here were more holding the camera up, yes, I could see that, but then of course then your face would be obstructed, so that would cause another set of issues. But just think about that. So I think that would definitely make things a little bit more effective if this was in the depicting the actual narrative that you had mentioned in your writing. I think that it could be more effective had this image more obviously been shooting a picture as opposed to just holding the the phone. Okay, now let me see. Okay, now don't forget, we've got a couple of requirements I think that need to be checked. Number one, this is supposed to be 8 by 10, and I'm perfectly fine going 10 by 8. By the way, in graphic design, did you know the width always comes first? So 8 by 10, when you see a requirement that says 8 by 10, that means 8-inch width, 10-inch height. But I'm okay going 10 by 8 here if that's how you want to go. But this is definitely not indicative of 8 by 10. So you definitely want to check your dimensions therein. Also, you've got a nice written description here, but don't forget the requirement is 200 to 300 words. I'm not real sure. I didn't do a word count, but I'm not quite sure if that reaches that minimum. So don't forget that. Okay, so again, I think the narrative quality is pretty good. It looks like your resolution is good. I mean, you've got some good, crisp, clear images for the foreground image, for the boot, and the space image, as well as this is really a super clear, high res image. So that's fantastic. I think there's two things that are really, really bothering me. Oh, by the way, having the planet visible through this little portion of the window, good touch. Nice, nice, nice. A couple of things that I think are a little problematic, and we'll address those we'll address those right now. Okay, so as far as the images go, we can really see a difference between the tonal distribution of the background images and the foreground image. And we can clearly see it right here when we look at the contrast associated with this portion of the composition and the contrast associated here. This contrast is much, much more dramatic. For that reason, I recommend coming into the foreground image and doing an adjustment layer, either a curves or a levels adjustment layer, whatever whatever you find to be um, easier for you to execute. Personally, I think levels adjustment layers are probably a little bit more intuitive than curves. Curves take a little bit more knowledge and practice, but a simple histogram adjustment layer using levels adjustment layer will definitely pump up the contrast in this so that it's a little bit of a more dramatic tonal distribution. So you want the darks to be darker, definitely. You want the lights to be a little lighter. So remember, when I say dark, you don't want to adjust it to the point where you lose any detail at all. So for instance, this area here turns black, you've gone too far. You definitely want to try to preserve that little contour right there and all of the associated details in the shadow areas. Don't want those to go to pure black. Okay, conversely, you don't want any of the highlight areas to go to pure paper white either. And that's a really, really important tip for adjustment layers. So again, the contrast associated with the foreground images, not versatile and not in accordance with the contrast of the background image. So it's immediately identifiable as an issue. The next thing, and probably the biggest problematic issue in the composition, is light source. We can see that the light source on the foreground image is from probably right around here somewhere. So we can see that depicted on the highlights of the steering wheel, the highlights on the toe of the boot, and the highlights on the ankle of the boot. Okay, now we take a look at the background images. This image of you with the phone, light source is where, Patrick? It's to the upper left, right up here, right? We can see that by the light and the shadow that's being cast on the front of your face and the highlights on the back of your head, indicating the light source up here. But in the background image, the light source is clearly on this side. So those are conflicting light sources, and that creates some uncomfortable visual tension that I think the viewer perceives as uncomfortable and something that doesn't appear. Even though it's a composite and it's a scene that doesn't exist in reality, it's still a depiction of unrealistic tonal variations, values, and light sources that kind of create this kind of jumbled confusion where the viewer's going, oh, wait a second, what? This isn't consistent, and a lot of viewers won't know how to really itemize that in their mind, but they definitely sense this uncomfortable visual tension. A lot of viewers won't even realize that when they're looking at this portion, they won't even realize, and only a trained eye is going to see different light sources, but that doesn't mean that subconsciously the different light sources creates this uncomfortable visual tension for the viewer, because it's what, Patrick? It's not natural. So we are so used to and accustomed to seeing consistent light sources in any scene that's depicted that's what we expect right down to the subconscious level. So again, the light sources and the contrast of the foreground image I see a little bit problematic. In summary, we've got the differing light sources. We got the contrast associated with the foreground image. We got the 200 to 300 word written explanation, and then we have the 8x10 required file size. Okay, so this is a great start. Love the narrative quality. Just a few little areas that need to be addressed. And I'll tell you what, if you have any questions or you might like me to make any clarifications, I'll be more than glad to do so. Just let me know. All right, great start. Thanks so much for sharing.